And welcome back inside CMA Fest. Day 2 coverage here inside the Music City Center. Again, the Sports Guys Podcast.com and, of course, KKTC True Country 99.9 and our friends at HighTideCountry.net. We're waiting for this one for a while, too. And like I said, I told you, we track him down, but I know how it is being a dad. It's tough out there, too. You got to take care of those little ones, too. But we got him here, CMA Fest. Day 2, it's the one, the only, Keith Anderson to the show. Keith, how you doing, brother?
Great. How you doing?
Limited sleep, but we're adrenaline is kicked in, and it wears off about probably 7-8 o'clock at night. But you just keep going this week,
Gotta keep pressing on, keep pushing, man. It's like zombie time here. Not quite yet, but probably this time tomorrow. It's that zombie time.
Day 2 and day 3 and 4, and it's just. I don't fly back to Texas until next Tuesday. I told everybody, I said, "Hey, phone's gonna shut off Monday. It's a recovery day. I'm sorry, but leave me alone Monday. We're just going to go to a couple things, have some lunch, and just rest most of the day. And at least the voice is still holding up. We can bring you guys the coverage. Hey, talk about this, too. You've been around this thing for a long time, man. And Picking Wildflowers, one of the big hits for you that just did real well on country radio and real well for the career, man. But as you look back and the timeline of those songs, when stuff like that comes out, it just impacts your career in a great way. I mean, years go by. Time's never on anybody's side, too, as well. What do you remember best about that song and the impact it made on your career?
Oh, man. It was I wrote it with John Rich from Big and Rich and Kim Williams, a great friend of ours who passed away a couple years ago. He's a multi-organization Hall of Fame songwriter. He's won, he's in the Hall of Fame of about 4 different songwriting groups. Wrote hits in the 70s, 80s, number one hits in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So great guy. He was a fan of John. John was a fan of him. They'd never written together, so we got together, and that was the first song we'd written. And everybody, knows how it's kind of ornery. It's kind of, not really about picking flowers as much as other things. And people are like, I can't imagine you and John Rich, in that room and just, how that was writing that. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of lines we could not use because they were a little too extreme, but it wasn't John and I. It was dirty old man Kim Williams that were writing those. He was one of a kind, man. I miss that Kim every day. But yeah, that's just one of those songs that we got lucky. It's the opening song, first song released, and you're just hoping for a hit, and it just had those things. Had the opening guitar riff that immediately people knew what it was. It had the fun melody, the fun lyrics, and then that crazy high melody in the chorus. And so it really just had those things, and it just took off, and it was just everything exploded after that. As a new artist, you're looking for something that just sets you apart because there's so many new artists coming out every month, and man, that really just threw everything into motion for us. So it was great.
Yeah, when you look at how the industry has changed over the last 15, 20 years, what streaming has done now, the impact for it. I mean, just putting music out is probably easier now and getting it uploaded and getting discovered than it was probably 15, 20 years ago when you guys started, because then it was like, we're going to go to concerts, we're going to put on the show, they're going to buy merch, buy tickets, buy a vinyl record, stuff like that too. And there was no streaming back in 90s country up in the early 2000s. And then from 2010 on, bang, things took over. Give me kind of the perspective on when you started compared to how it's changed now and the way streaming has impacted music.
Well, it's just, it sounds earlier, and I don't want to be the old man, get off, but it is, I just remember growing up listening to music and being a fan of an artist. They didn't have downloads, so you couldn't just buy that single. You had to buy the album, and 9 times out of 10, I became a big fan of a certain artist, not because of the hits, but because all the other cool songs that were on an album that were never on the radio that you never would have heard if you didn't buy the whole album. And so you dive deeper into their songwriting and into their just musical styles. And like I said, a lot of times the favorite songs on an album or a CD, whatever, weren't the singles. It was the other stuff. And it really gives you a deeper dive into who the person is and what they're all about. And you just don't get that anymore. People, they don't make, hardly ever make the 15 song. These EPs are taking over. They're like, 5 and 6 song EPs. And even then, people are just going to download the hit singles. And so that's one of the big things is just, just not going to be selling the same amount of records, and you work hard on all the songs, not just the singles. And you kind of want to share, that experience of those songs that you think are important enough to be on that album.
Let's talk about new projects and things you're working on too as well. The single last fall came out, and I love the song there for you guys too, and just kind of set the tone for 2024 and some things you're working on.
Well, guys, it's crazy to think, but coming up this next year, we're trying to just work on a couple of things, some cool duet ideas. But yeah, it's almost 20 years now that Pick 'em Off Flowers came out, and so we're looking at maybe doing some kind of remake on that next year, maybe some kind of duet with a cool girl singer, and then just working on new music, just back to writing. Never quit touring, always been touring, but took some time off the writing, just raising a couple of young kids, and now we're getting an age where I'm really had that freedom to get back out there and do all the writing stuff again. And yeah, that's how I got my start, is writing hits for other. Before I had my hit, I'd written hits for Garth Brooks and George Jones and Big and Rich and Gretchen. And so um, really having a fun time getting back into that. And now, as weird as it sounds, a lot of these brand new artists, grew up listening to Pick 'em Off Flowers and Double XL. And so I've got some of those guys that are really excited to start writing with those guys too, and hopefully get some stuff on their records and get some new music from my CD, and just gonna be a busy. Plus, we're just touring. It we just signed with a new booking agent, Kincaid, and it's the busiest we've been. So it's gonna be a lot of fun these next couple of years.
When you look at the songs you've written, you mentioned for those other artists too, was there one kind of stood out, maybe a couple that you still, even today, that those artists maybe turned into hits and things like that were just special to you and songs that you wrote?
Yeah, the big number one for uh, Big and Rich, I actually recorded that and thought that it was going to be a single on my second record, and didn't know that they'd recorded it also until they told me, like, "Hey, you got our first single." I'm like, "Which one?" So that's one, that would love to have had as a single for me. But at the same time, it went number one, so you can't get much bigger than that. So yeah, they did a great job on it, and uh, yeah, I mean, you just early on, it was just I was just looking for anything to get some traction. So if another artist would record a song, it was like, heck yeah, that helps me out as a songwriter and eventually an artist. And so that's probably the only one. Primarily recorded a song called "I'll Bring the Music," but never put it as a single. That we ended up, working a little bit on this third CD with some of the radio stations, and it's still a big song on our live show for us. So but other than that, I've just been happy when somebody wants to record something, because it's written so much. You can't record everything. So if somebody likes something, um, it's okay with me.
When you look at the songwriting process, and a lot of people just, as you know, move to this town and can just write songs, kind of stay behind the scenes, create something from nothing, come up with the idea. What's kind of take me to that Keith Anderson school of songwriting? Is it personal experience? Is some of it just kind of dream world fantasy type stuff? What kind of goes into that mix of songwriting for Keith Anderson?
I think for it to be real, it's just you have to have lived it in some sort. Whether it's like somebody close to you that's lived it, somebody your best friend that you've witnessed this crazy thing at a party, or especially for these heartbreak songs that I've kind of been known for. Um, I don't think you can write those kind of emotions in words, because you really have to be able to write something that somebody can feel, which is a strange thing, and you can't just write and describe it. You've got to describe it in a way to where they're like, "Oh, I felt that." So I think you've got to have gone through it to write something like that, or at least know somebody close that's gone through it. So I think first of all, it's just got to be real. It's got to come from a real place, and then at that point, it's just the fun part of trying to find a catchy melody and a fun way of saying it, or a very real way of saying it, depending on if it's a serious song or a party song.
Every artist has got their different perspective on things, and I grew up being that '90s baby. You mentioned George Jones from my hometown, Beaumont, Texas, down there where I'm at, and then Clay Walker and Tracy Byrd, Mark Chestnut, all those guys that I listened to, did radio in that market for years, went out to concerts and covered things at Cutters and different places down there, different bars. Saw the guys kind of scratch their teeth and get their feet wet and get their start somewhere. Everybody gets their start somewhere down there. But looking back at it, I think that '90s country wave. You look at a Zach Top and a Randall King and some guys blowing up now. That was my sound back in the day, and I'm sure for you that had to be huge influence on your writing and your music back in the day.
Big time, yeah. Uh, Graduated Oklahoma State and then moved to Dallas for my first job, and it was just crazy because I grew up in a small town where it was just the music you heard was what was on the radio. There was no live music scene around Miami, Oklahoma at the time. Now they've got a big casino there that a lot of artists go to. But at the time, I went there, then went to Oklahoma State, which had some bars and some live music, but not like national acts. I mean, Garth Brooks had graduated there about 6 years before I got there, and 7 years, and so he was like everybody's big brother. We were cheering for him and all these. But when we got to Dallas, that was the first time that I was actually able to, you know, listen to my music during the week. But then all of a sudden, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, one of my favorite singers were going to be playing live somewhere, because they had, Billy Bob's, and they had Cowboys, Arlington Cowboys, Red River Cowboys downtown. They had Country 2000, Country 2000. They had like 6 major country clubs there, where somebody every Thursday, Friday, Saturday was going to, so I was just that crazy geek that would, had a job and had to be there early on the Friday. If it was a good show on Thursday, I was there early enough to get up to the stage, because I wanted to see, not just hear them. I wanted to just hear, first of all, if they could sound like that, because there's a lot of people live don't sound like they do on the radio.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was really just, that's when I fell in love with this whole live thing. It was because there's a lot of times different versions live, or they have just the things they're doing on stage, the entertainment side of it, the fun things. And so I would just be sitting there watching like a kid at Christmas the whole show. And I was, like I said, nerd guy that was just there early. Sometimes have a handheld recorder trying to, record songs or the new ways they were doing it, so I could do it with my band. We were playing around Dallas. And that was the big thing about, I'm not even sure what the question was, but it was all about, for me, just that experience of wow, live music for the first time just kind of changed everything for me. And that's when I was like, this is what I want to do. And the songwriting side of that is, grew up loving the songs. So first thing I would do is take the insert out of a CD, the J card back, or a cassette, the J card, or the CD, because I want to know who the songwriters were. And so back then I would actually, before I listened to the CD, I'd read who the songwriters were. And over time, you kind of get an idea of who these songwriters are, and you kind of know what the album's going to sound like before you even dive into it. And so that was the crazy thing, is when I first moved to Nashville, I knew so many of these songwriters' names, but you don't know what they look like. You don't have a face. So when I finally progressed and was able to start writing with some of these, legendary songwriters, it was crazy, because I was, nervous, because I was a fan of their music. But for the first time, I was going to put a face to a name. It was just crazy when you finally start getting to see those side of the hero, because everybody knows the artist, but the songwriters are kind of unsung heroes. So it was really fun to begin to make friends with those guys and actually see what Skip Ewing looks like, and what Kim Williams looks like, and Bob DiPiero, and these names you've seen on so many records. So that was a cool start of it too.
It's just the impact that 90s country was so impactful for me. And like I said, you'll still play it on the radio right now too, because interviewed so many of the legends like yourself in the business that just really get out there and bust their tail too. And hey, we appreciate you being with us. Glad we put this together. And I know when the new music comes out, man, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anytime. And we'll get in there. Like, yeah, I owe you about 5 of these. So
it's all good. Keith Anderson being with us here on the Backstage Pass, again, talking about all the great music, some new things coming out here too as well. Again, the sportsguyspodcast.com out there too, Grand Slam of Sports and Music. And of course, our friends, hightidecountry.net and KKTC True Country 99.9. We're back in a little bit. Ali Colleen coming up here and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. Day 2 of CMA Fest rolls on here from Nashville, Tennessee, inside the Music City Center. We're back in a flash. Stay tuned.